Look, if you didn't have what you call patriarchy, then what you would have is a hell on earth for women.
Yeah, that's one of the many loaded statements that Mr. Shahid makes in the video we're about to watch. Without further ado, let's jump right in.
Do you believe that men and women are equal?
Honestly, the myths, No, of course not. Who told you they are? You don't believe they are. If it's something that you have to constantly ask about, constantly struggle to achieve and enforce, then it isn't a natural state, is it? If it was an obvious accepted fact, then it goes without saying, no argument is necessary. No one ever says, do you believe that men and women both have arms and legs? No one ever says, do you believe that both men and women breathe oxygen? But you ask, are they equal? Or do I think that they're equal? Do I believe that they're equal? Well, if you believe that they're equal, and you believe that their equality was a natural, undeniable reality, then you would be insulting my intelligence to ask that question. Just as you would be insulting my intelligence if you ask me, Shahid, do you believe that both men and women have arms and legs and breathe air? But you're not actually asking me if men and women are equal. You're asking if I believe that they're equal, which means that you're asking me if I believe in your concept of equality. Well, I don't.
Straight off the bat, he puts forth a claim that's absurd to me. The fact that simply because something is getting questioned for the first time, that its validity might be lacking. That's a wild statement. The entirety of human history can be simply summed up as us questioning centuries-held beliefs and standards in an effort to create a more equitable society. In fact, at the root of this trend is the idea of a shared humanity, the belief that all human beings partake of a common nature and are thus entitled to share basic human rights, opportunities, and protections. I mean, think about it. Do you guys remember the Crusades and the period that came before it? You know, when it was okay to violate people's rights provided they did not belong to your faith. And fast forward to the 1800s. Throughout the Industrial Revolutions, it was accepted to work children as young as 6 years old, up to 19 hours a day for little or no pay in some of the most dangerous conditions. We don't need to talk about the transatlantic slave trade or the gross biblical and sometimes even scientific justifications used to maintain the slave trade. Oh, and when Western nations such as Britain and France first outlawed the slave trade, all the authorities in Muslim states were against the move, claiming that, number one, the Quran isn't against the practice, so they should have the right to practice it. And number two, this is a practice that has existed even in times of pre-Islamic Arabia, so what gives the West a right to declare it illegal? You see, all these things were accepted and considered the natural state of things at their time, which means if they had not been questioned at some point, we'd be living in a kind of dystopia none of us would appreciate. So yeah, let's hope we keep challenging these nonsensical, commonly held standards in the modern world. Be it unfair discrimination against immigrants around the world, the mistreatments of Palestinians at the hands of the Israelites, or apparently overt sexism. Now, to be fair, Mr. Shahid does claim towards the end of the clip that this just isn't his version of equality. So let's see what his version is.
Women are not equal. Men and men are not equal. Women and women are not equal. Individuals are not equal. How can collections of individuals be equal with collections of other individuals? That's illogical. It doesn't make any sense. Are you equal with your boss? If so, then why is he or she your boss instead of you? I'm not equal to another man who's stronger than me, who's smarter than me. I'm not equal to him in strength, and I'm not equal to him in intelligence. I'm not equal to a man who's richer than me in wealth. I'm not equal to a man who has a higher status in society than me. There are things that I can't understand no matter how hard I try, and there's other people who can understand those same things effortlessly.
So his argument for claiming that men and women are not equal is that, you know, some people are stronger than others, some are smarter than others, and some are faster than others. Well, I agree with that assertion up to that point. But sir, Mr. Shahid, will you kindly go ahead and explain how the men who are not stronger, who are not smarter, who are not overall better in society, can you go ahead and showcase how they've been excluded or disadvantaged in relation to decision making and access to social and economic resources? Please go ahead, because let's not forget, All the arguments he is making in this video are designed to justify what the Western countries call abject sexism in the Middle East and North Africa, the MENA area. He actually points out as much within the same video. And for those wondering, some of the sexist policies that exist in the Middle East and North African region today include, but are not limited to, the marital laws which still exist in several MENA countries. Yeah, these laws are as ridiculous as they sound. In some of these countries, a rape can avoid prosecution or punishment if they marry their victim, and these laws still apply even if the victim is a minor. An example of how demeaning these laws can be is what happened in Morocco in 2013. The law was repealed following widespread outrage when a 16-year-old woman killed herself after she was forced by her parents to marry her rape. Can you imagine someone defending that? Number 2, in Algeria, the family code restricts divorced mothers to have custody of their children if they remarry. But surprise, surprise, this law doesn't apply if the man remarries. Number 3, Jordanian women married to foreigners are not able to pass on their nationality to their children, but again, the same law doesn't apply to men who marry foreigners. And number 4, which is the most absurd in my opinion, in Iraqi, husbands have a legal right to punish their wives, and this basically includes whooping their ass like children. Not even children can be whooped up in such a manner in some countries. The last but by no means least example that I'll give you is Article 153 of Kuwait's Penal Code. This code basically states that if a man kills his female relatives, it's a misdemeanor punishable by a maximum of 3 years jail time. And no surprise, this law doesn't apply to women who kill their male relatives. The examples are quite endless, and in Iran, we all saw to what length some of these Middle Eastern governments are willing to go to maintain most of these oppressive customs. So I assume the points Shahid makes in this video are intended to act as justifications for sexist issues that exist in Middle East, such as this. Now back to his point about people having different abilities. Of course, people are not the same on a personal level. Hell, we are not even the same on a societal level. There are multiple noticeable differences between African, Western, Asian, and Middle Eastern societies. But that doesn't mean that people from any of these societies are more valuable than others. And that's why whenever we create economic, social, and cultural opportunities or policies in such dynamic societies, we try our level best to make them fair and impartial for people of all races and from all walks of life. And if all of you agree with that point at the very least, then why should the conclusion be any different when it comes to equality between men and women? Anyway, the interviewer then goes on to ask an even more important question.
A woman.
But Islam is quite patriarchal, isn't it? I mean, doesn't the Quran say that men have authority over women?
Well, don't they? I mean, men are the ones who have been oppressing you all this time, right? I mean, according to your own narrative, men have been running the show. The feminists are asking for their so-called rights from who exactly? Look, if you didn't have what you call patriarchy, then what you would have is a hell on earth for women. Because clearly, women do not have the power to coerce men, to force men, to make men deal with them this way or that way. If you're out somewhere and a man starts to chat you up and you don't want to be chatted up, what do? You tell him, I have a boyfriend, I'm married, and he goes away. You have to conjure up an imaginary man to get him to back off, because 9 times out of 10, only a man can keep another man in check, because men are inherently more dangerous than women. Instead of patriarchy, replace that word with bodyguard. What makes more sense? For you to be my bodyguard or for me to be your bodyguard? Who do you think is more capable of protecting who? From who? If men didn't protect women, who would? Why, men would do whatever they wanted.
I'll revert back to the points I made earlier. Simply because one group had the capacity of evil to subjugate another over a certain period of time doesn't mean that was the right thing to do, or that the subjugation should continue. And if your argument for why this authority over women should be allowed to thrive is the claim that only men can protect women from other evil men, well, I'm sorry to burst your bubble. Research has proven time and again that this couldn't be further from the truth. According to multiple studies, all of which I'll link in the description below, most men are unlikely to intervene in situations that present risk of physical and sexual assault. And that's especially true if the situation presents risk for both the female victim and the bystander. So yeah, men are scared of other men as well. No surprises there. But do you know what's even worse? The unwillingness to intervene was proven across the board, including among men harboring benevolent forms of sexism. You know, the kind of men who undermine women's autonomy because they view women as dependent on and in need of men for protection. I know what some of you are thinking, you know, this is a Western thing and is a product of feminism and their constant desire to vilify masculinity. Well, I'll disagree with that as well. Having grown up in Kenya, Africa, which remains one of the most conservative spaces in the world, a rule of thumb amongst most men is if you come across a domestic violence situation but you don't know any of the parties involved, then it's best if you walk away. Thankfully, the Kenyan government takes reported domestic abuse cases quite seriously, and that keeps most men in check. And if you truly live in a semi-functional society, then at least you should have sufficient checks and balances that do their best to keep abusive men in check. So, tell me again, how does the self-described authority over women translate to a net positive for women? I'm waiting. And guys, I swear I'll engage with any comment that comprehensively answers this in the comment section below. But coherent answers only. In the meantime, to conclude, I always love it when people call out the West for their hypocrisy when they try criticizing other regions, even though their own societies are pretty fucked up. That said, I also always try my best to make sure I don't excuse the other side's atrocities in the process. And everything I've discussed in today's video is also why I've always been of the opinion that most old school values can never thrive in merit-based spaces like academia or societies that value pragmatism. Every time you put these values under constructive criticism, you realize that they are either deep-rooted in nostalgia or an unfounded fear of the disruption of the status quo. Otherwise, you should definitely check out the whole video from Shahid. It's quite interesting and I've left a link to it in the description section below.